Welcome back, everybody. Fun video today. Seems like I've had a little mini series of Pokemon happening on the channel recently. There was the Pokemon Legends Arceus review, and then the innovation versus replication video, where a good chunk of that was spent looking at the Pokemon sales charts. And then the last video, maybe some of you are coming from there, ranking the Pokemon series. Now, this one is asking the question, where do Game Freak and Nintendo take the series from here? And I've got one more question to pose you now, and this is one that you could start to answer in the comments. What did the most recent games do right and wrong? And after I give a few examples, fairly quick examples, of what I thought Scarlet and Violet did correctly and incorrectly, then I'm going to present some more general ideas. Just a lot of things that I've had lingering in my head that I couldn't necessarily squeeze into the last video either. So first, let's get into a few of the good things, some of the things that I actually liked. The open world. Drastically improved from Sword and Shield. I don't even know if you could call it an open world in Sword and Shield. You had large areas in those games. Finally though, Scarlet and Violet, an expansive map with a lot of different places to go and different regions and types of terrain. I really liked it. Is it perfect? Is it the best open world we've ever seen? No. But if that's the next step for Pokemon, which I'm sure it is, then Game Freak is at least doing it correctly. And of course there could be improvements. The other thing that I liked were the roaming Pokemon in the open world. I mentioned in the last video how all of these roaming Pokemon had certain dispositions towards you, the player. Some of them were timid and they could run away, etc. I would love to see more of that. But more specifically, where I think Nintendo and Game Freak can expand on the idea, think of Tears of the Kingdom, how we finally had the biological enemies and the mechanical enemies clashing the fields. Now, you don't have to have a bunch of crazy Pokemon clashes in the next Pokemon game. You don't need to see a Pokemon that you want to catch faint in a battle, but maybe you can see more examples of Pokemon coexisting. Maybe you can take some of the ideas that are shown in a game like Pokemon Snap and somehow make them work in the next mainline game. I would love to see that. I also liked that there were new ideas for the story and new ways to progress through the game. So we saw the 3 branching paths. It was a cool idea. I had no issues with that. Maybe, the gym battles were still, at the end of the day, just gym battles, but that's okay. More experimentation like that is welcome. I do like the idea of keeping Pokemon gyms as a whole, though. Some of the things that I did not like. Breeding was completely changed. Well, I say completely changed because I didn't know where breeding was to begin with. Turns out you no longer see a Pokemon ranch or a Pokemon daycare. It's actually just while you're picnicking. And 2 of the Pokemon in your party can get together and make an egg. I thought, well, I didn't spend enough time with the Pokemon school, so maybe it was actually explained there. I had to look up how to breed Pokemon, and then when that was the answer, I thought, what is this? You're just making me wait for an egg. And I know in the last games, you had to wait as well. You were usually just riding your bicycle around and counting the steps until you could go back to the nursery. But this was even worse waiting. You weren't even cycling around. You were just standing there at the picnic table. So breeding needs to revert to something else. I'll present an idea for it later. I thought the towns were too dull. It wasn't necessarily the fact that they were empty, although some were emptier than others, right? It looks like Game Freak spent a little more time on some towns instead of the others. It wasn't that I had a problem with them being laid out in the open world the way that they were. I mean, maybe you could have taller buildings. Maybe they could be a little bit more sprawling. And maybe the ones that are meant to be more just small towns and villages could have different styles. Really, my issue with the towns were just, there were no quests. There was nothing to really do in the town except get your gym badge and go. You could talk to people, you could maybe find the odd trade, but that was about it, right? And the boutiques, the stores, don't get me started again on how everything was separated by item. So to see if there were different things available, you were popping in and out of 6 different stores per town sometimes? Terrible. The last thing here, the last quick example, it's not necessarily a bad thing, although I'll get to reasons why I didn't think it was good. I didn't interact with the main hub very much, your Pokemon school, your academy. Personally, I thought that the loading times were just way too long or too repetitive, So even if I wanted to go to a few of the different classes, I'll break in momentarily and just say one good thing is that they did give it a little indicator when there was a new quest or something that you could progress in one of the classrooms. I liked that. But still, having to switch back and forth, and your dorm is one loaded area, and then you have to load the next classroom, and then you have to load the office. It was just too much of that. So I didn't actually spend a lot of time there. I just got in, I got out. It'd be nice to see something like that changed. Maybe it doesn't even have to be an area where you walk around in 3D. Just make it a series of menus that look nice. I don't know. You can argue anything that you want. Go ahead. Now, here are some ideas, some suggestions that I would really like to see. These are the things that I had the most fun thinking about in the last week. The first one, Game Freak, they clearly continue to work on the boxes and the Pokédex. That much was evident in Scarlet and Violet with the Pokédex. It had a nice presentation. I thought it was ridiculous, though, how you couldn't scroll through more than one Pokemon at a time. You couldn't scroll through sets of 10, for example. We continue to get more Pokemon. So, like, your Pokédex might go from 350 to 450 to 550 in the next game, whatever it is. Here's my question. Here's my problem. Why do we still not have filters for the boxes? I am somebody who likes to organize every single Pokemon I catch. I've got good Pokemon and bad Pokemon based on the natures. Beyond that, I then like to those are the categories, and then I like to sort them by number caught, or not number caught, number in the Pokédex. Just why can't we have anything? Why can't there be locks on certain boxes so that you don't allow any more Pokemon to fill the box, and it would skip that box and deposit them into the next one? We've had boxes since the very beginning of Pokemon, and yet there's been so little ease of access. There's been so little done to help them as far as quality of life changes. Make it easier for us, the player, when we're catching hundreds of Pokemon. So that's one of my major gripes. That is something that I would like to see changed, and I'm pretty sure they're going to continue to work on them. I don't know why they wouldn't. The next major idea, I think that there are ways, and this is about breeding, I said I would get back to this. I think that there are ways you can take the pastures from Pokemon Legends Arceus, where they were just presented to you in Jubilife City, and you could see your Pokemon behind the fences. That was pretty cool. Well, why not take something like that and combine it with daycares returning? I don't think that you need to be limited to just raising 2 Pokemon in the daycare at a time. You know what? You want to make things easier for the player since there are so many new Pokemon? How about you can deposit 6 Pokemon into a Pokemon ranch, and then you could pair them off, and you could breed 3 pairs of Pokemon at a time. Is that going to be a little too hectic where you get a bunch of Pokemon eggs at once? Well, get creative, Game Freak. Maybe you can actually hold 8 eggs at a time, in addition to your 6 party Pokemon, or your 6 party Pokemon and 6 eggs. And when the egg hatches, you have to substitute it in your party or deposit the Pokemon. There are a lot of ways that Game Freak can deal with breeding and nurseries and all that kind of stuff and make it better for us, the players. I think that's probably my best idea on this list. Next, something needs to be done about natures, or at least IVs. I'm sick of the IVs. I don't think professional players or competitive players care about them either. To my knowledge, you would just make everything 31 IVs, unless maybe you wanted to do like a trick Pokemon where you're actually going to make, so let's say like Incineroar is the most popular Pokemon, right, in the meta. And you want to, for some reason, have a slower Incineroar. So you set yours to 29 speed IVs. Okay, I understand that there could be ways that players can tweak their Pokemon that way, but for the casual player, at least for me, IVs are terrible. And I'm always hoping that I have a Pokemon with good IVs. Here's the thing. I think when IVs were introduced to the series, yes, I understand that they're related to a lot of other systems and a lot of other things in the Pokemon's presentation. Like, weren't once upon a time IVs connected to shiny status? And I think IVs have always been connected to hidden power. Well, scrap all of that, come up with something new, because I do not view IVs as bonus stats. I view IVs as the set stats, and either you're removing my stats or you're making them full. So they gotta go. At the very least, and this is about natures, maybe give us more mints, because I think everybody just wants optimal Pokemon. I don't think people want to play with suboptimal Pokemon, even if they're casual. I don't. Maybe there could be a better system altogether, and we don't have to rely on mints. I don't know. Next, there are still so many of the same basic tropes in these games. Now, I'm not necessarily tired of all of them. Some of these things make Pokemon Pokemon. For example, with the starters, fire, grass, water, fire, grass, water, etc. Does that need to change? No, not necessarily. If you change from fire, grass, and water, are you going to get as iconic a set of three? Like, rock, ice, and ground, I think, are a perfect triangle of weaknesses and strengths. I'm not sure. That doesn't exactly scream iconic to me. If fire, grass, and water, that is Pokemon. But what about the secondary typings? It's so tiresome now that we keep on getting fighting, fairy, and ghost. And it's not even a perfect triangle. So I'm not sure why those have to be the set secondary types. Why not do something? Here's an idea. How about every starting Pokemon is normal, but then it acquires those fire, grass, and water typings? That's a bad idea. What about, though, you just go nuts? Who cares? The water type takes on flying. The fire type takes on electric. The grass type takes on ground. Who cares? Just quit giving us the same thing every single time. Anything else that I had to say about this? I wrote down that the tropes also continue with the early game Pokemon you encounter. There's always the new normal Pokemon. There's usually the new flying type. We didn't have a new flying type in Scarlet and Violet. Not in the beginning area, anyways. Squawkabilly appeared later on in the game. And we always have new bug Pokemon. Again, just these early level Pokemon. I understand it's like a very safe place to start the player. And then if you go to the ice region, then that's more exciting. If you go to the rocky region, then that's more exciting. And that's why they save those Pokemon for that areas. But why not start the player in an ice area? Right? Why not start the player in a snowy mountain? And then, how about this? You know how in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, you start the game and you go through Petalburg, and that's where one of the gyms are located, but you can't actually battle it yet. You're going to have to come back later when you're stronger. Do something like that. Start in an ice area, and then maybe you spend the tutorial there, and there's something in the story where it's like you get medevaced, and then you go to the major Pokemon Center or the major Pokemon Hospital in the biggest city in the region. And then you can have the rest of your adventure there, eventually go back to the ice region. I don't know. Next idea. Can the gym leaders finally have more varied teams? This isn't so much a problem with the gym leaders specifically, and it also extends to the Elite Four. I've got a few problems with them. How about this? Just to make it a little more exciting. Different themes instead of different types. So maybe instead of the steel type gym, it's actually all of the Pokemon that are kind of mechanical. So like you can have Golurk, right? That's a ghost ground type from Generation 5. It might fit in perfectly. And you could have some steel Pokemon and you could have some whatever. I don't have enough ideas coming to head right now, but that's just something I thought of. Have thematic gyms instead of type-based gyms. There's a lot of things that I'm sure you guys, the audience, can come up with. So if you have any ideas, throw those in the comments. Has there ever been a theme that you wish you could take on in a gym? Next idea. This is a really just small observation that I made, but we've gone from playing as the protagonist, the set protagonist, like not Ash, but Red and Gold, etc. They were these characters in the stories who sometimes had bigger roles to play, specific roles, specific storylines and backstories, but not always. Regardless, that has been carried over now to having just player inserts. I am my character. I am not playing as Gold. I'm not playing as Red. And you could argue that it's always been that way. That's okay. Here's my issue. Why then is the customization still so limited? Now in Scarlet and Violet, it kind of made sense that your uniform was going to be adhering to certain rules and regulations. Like you always had to have the colored pants that matched your school. fine. But don't tease us with having 100 different items that you could customize with, and then half of them are clashing with the color scheme. So I guess my big problem is just customization overall feels sorely lacking in certain areas. I'm okay with some things. Like I said, that's not an idea that I fully thought out. Let's move on. Here's a big one. Or not a big one, but here's just something that I think is an important one. Give us more JRPG elements. This is really a personal thing. This is just something that I like. I liked how in the older games, it seemed as if you spent more time hunting wild Pokemon for held items, right? Was it if you had a Butterfree with compound eyes and it was at the lead of your party, then you were going to get a higher chance of a held item on the opposing wild Pokemon? And there were more reasons to hunt wild Pokemon. I wish we could have more stuff like that again. I think the games will continue in the direction of typical open world adventure games. And so things like having to grind out wild Pokemon will probably be forgotten and abandoned for other things. Maybe the Legends games can pick up from there, or vice versa. Maybe they actually take the Legends games and they make them more of the adventure games, and then the Pokemon mainline games can stay as the true JRPG games. I don't know. I think, though, there is an opportunity where now that you have Legends, and if Game Freak continues with Legends, and you have the core games, you have an opportunity to run these series parallel to each other, but have them so clearly distinguished from one another. This is the game that plays more in this style, and this is the game that plays more in the other style. You want to roam the world a little more, you want to have more action gameplay, play Legends. You want to have more of an RPG experience, you want to be fiddling around with all of these little mechanics and complex systems, play the core games. That's just wishful thinking. Next. Another point about the JRPG elements. Oh yeah, so they teased this in Scarlet and Violet. I would love the opportunity, or more opportunities, doesn't have to be the full game, but to play with a party of players. So in the wild, right, you've got your companions and they can join you for like a 15-minute stretch of the game. So all of a sudden now you're roaming, let's just say the new equivalent of Viridian Forest. And it's 4 of you out together, and you're battling wild Pokemon together, you're battling the trainers together. Actually, this has kind of already appeared in the last games. Diamond, Pearl, Platinum may have been the game where you teamed up with the most friendly trainers. And so every time, not every time, but in those areas, when you were teamed up with an enemy trainer, they could heal your Pokemon after battle. Every battle that you took on was a double battle. Hey, have more stuff like that. I'm actually surprised, now that it was in the last games, I'm realizing that we didn't have more of it in Scarlet and Violet. So, finally, my last suggestion, my last wish for the series. What are ways that we can use more Pokemon? One of my complaints, not that it deters me from playing the games at all, but I do think that the Pokédex and the Pokemon you catch in-game, the numbers are astronomical now. Our boxes are so expansive and extensive. We need more ways to use new Pokemon, or different Pokemon that we collect. And I think the best way to do this has already been done. Again, Generation 5, have some of the gym battles be types. Let me rephrase that so it makes a little more sense. But enforce certain type challenges for different gyms. I know I just talked about themes, but this could be a theme. If you want to beat this gym, then you can only challenge us if you have a party of at least 3 ice types. Perfect. Ice types have kind of been sitting in the back of my box. Now I have a reason to pull them out. I can do a little bit of grinding, which is one of those JRPG things. I can bring my ice types up to level 35, and then it's go time. Just something. Give me more reasons, more incentives to use all of these Pokemon that I'm collecting. That was my dryer. Not just because I want to. Not just if I have the time and if I feel like it, then sure, I will. Make me, right? You're giving me all the Pokemon. Make me use them. I don't know. All right, let's move on now. Those are all of my suggestions. Those are all of my wishes. I think it would be a lot of fun to hear what you think of them and also for you to present your own. Now, knowing the companies, knowing Game Freak, and knowing Nintendo, can we actually predict what's going to come next? Can we say for certain whether they will use some of those ideas or whether they will just ignore them because they're too complex or something like that, and they'll just go about their merry way? Well, I have some questions about these companies and why I'm not too optimistic about them presenting new things. So I don't know if they fully know how to balance difficulty. And it sounds a little silly, but the last game, I would say they took a risk. And balancing the difficulty when you could go anywhere and you could go to any gym, I mean, that's kind of hard to do, but I think they did a fairly good job. The next thing I wonder about them and that I'm skeptical about, well, they're always trying to appeal to all ages, aren't they? They know that they have an older fan base, and they want to make the games fun for them. I'm part of the older fan base, I think. They know that they have a new fan base, or they're always trying to get new fans. So they don't want to make the games too complex. And this bleeds into my second point, is that there's always going to be some balancing of accessibility for the newcomers with the complexity for the longtime fans. Again, what does it all mean, and what can we expect from Game Freak and Nintendo? What is Nintendo saying down to Game Freak? Like, you better include this in your games, otherwise, I don't know. Now, what do we know is coming up on the horizon as far as the games go? We've got black and white remakes, I'm sure. They have to be coming at some point. And I really hope that we're going to get a new Legends game. Now, for the Legends game, can we do Mew or Celebi? There's some good ideas packed in there. Mew is referred to as the ancestor of all Pokemon in some of the Pokedex descriptions, and Celebi is the time traveler Pokemon. So if you have Celebi, if you have Pokemon Legends Celebi, you're pretty much giving the writers carte blanche to do whatever they want. You can go from ancient times to future times, etc. Go nuts. Could you do something with Pokemon Legends Rayquaza? And then you're dealing with a lot of the ancient Pokemon. Is it going to be too similar to Sinnoh and Arceus? I don't think so. So those are some ideas about Legends. And now just to go back to what can come next and Black and White and their remakes, I wanted to highlight some of the release dates here. Fire Red and Leaf Green, 2004. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, 2009. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, 2014. You see? 5 years apart. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, 5 years later, 2021. Now, does that mean that we have to wait in 2026 for the Black and White remakes? I don't know. Hopefully not. Legends and Scarlet and Violet just came out last year in 2022. For the core series of games, they tend to be every 3 years apart. So we're probably going to be seeing, and also at the end of the year. So we'll probably get the next Generation 10 in 2025 at the end of the year. With Legends, who knows? What else can we kind of tie into all of this stuff? Well, the Switch's successor, for one thing, right? It's estimated, or people are assuming, that it'll be released sometime late next year. So end of 2024, we get the Switch 2, or the Switch's successor. The Switch actually opened with Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, so not a core game. Maybe the Switch 2 opens with another Legends game. Maybe the Switch 2 opens with the Black and White remake. Who knows? I'm just throwing some of these things out here for what we can actually expect and what could be more concrete than my ideas. But what I'm most looking forward to is, again, that you take to the comments. Let me know what games are coming next. But also let me know your ideas and what you would like to see in the core series of games or in the spin-offs. Anyways, that's all. I said it would be a shorter video. I'm not so sure if it is now. Thank you everybody for watching once again. That concludes this little Pokemon mini-series on the channel, and I will see you in the next video.